Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I see all of you have braved the weather to be with us today, but I assure you it's going to be worth it. So all of the sweat stains are going to pay much dividends because we have an amazing panel of speakers with us today. I know the intros were quite enthralling. Full disclosure, we gave them to each other, but I think the best way to kick things off for this panel is really to hear from the panelists a little bit more about their backgrounds, which I think will give you a lot of insight into the conversation we're going to have. But before we do that, and I hand over to them to chat a little bit about themselves, I think today's panel is exactly an example of the topic that we're going to discuss here today, right? It's because of this summit right here in Cairo, in Egypt, that we've managed to get people like Sharif, like Abudlaziz and Janade here. Everyone from the most active investor on the African continent at the early stage to the Dubai Future District Fund, to one of the success stories coming out of the MENA region from a startup perspective. And creating conversations like these are, I think, something that Egypt really can help accelerate. But more on that later. But to start off, Abudlaziz, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you ended up here today?
Thank you so much. Real pleasure being here. Thank you, RiseUp, for hosting us. My name is Abudlaziz Loughani. I've been investing, operating in consumer internet for the past maybe 17 years. Did finance, as well, private equity, early beginnings, but managed to kind of blend both and find my calling very early on in around 16 years ago. Had my first entrepreneurial attempt, exited that business later on, and then did some public work as well. Good luck, Sharif, with that. And then later on went back to my roots and started Floward. Floward is a gifting platform. Our business model is we procure flowers from different parts of the world, mainly from Latin America and East Africa. We courier them to our fulfillment centers that we manage ourselves, showcase those flowers on our website, on the app, and then also manage the last mile delivery through our refrigerated vehicles. Gifting is so embedded in our DNA, in our culture, at least in this part of the world. It's part of our religion as well. I'm sure many of us here relate to many verses من القرآن. من لا يشكر الناس لا يشكر الله تهادوا تحابوا هذه كلها. These are all very much inherited values from our religion, from our culture. So I think linking that, we were not the first flowers company in the region. We're not the first chocolate shop in the region. But I think linking that gifting, seamless experience, sender recipient, that kind of thinking, or solving for that experience, is something very, very new to the region and probably to the rest of the world. Fast forward, we started like 6 years ago. This is our 7th year. Today, we're present across 9 countries. So we operate out of all of the Gulf, Egypt, Jordan, and the UK. We service around 40 cities. We hope we have a happy 1.5 million customers. And maybe we can talk a bit later about how the future looks like for us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Abudlaziz. Janade, a very good friend of mine, but I think the audience would love to know a bit more about you and what you do.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being so brave to sit in this heat. I'm Janade from Cape Town in South Africa. I am a 5 times fund manager, created 5 funds over the past 20 years. Our current fund is Launch Africa Ventures. Over the past 3 years, we've invested in 148 companies. across 22 different African countries, so we're truly Pan-African. In Egypt, we have 23 investments. One of them is a stand over there called Aman Leak, but we've invested in One Trolley, in Orcas, we did a deal 2 weeks ago in Wyack Health. So that's our latest member to the Launch Africa family from Egypt. We specifically are very active in Egypt because for us, the ability to scale these companies into the Middle East or the GCC region is much easier than maybe scaling into Africa, the sub-Saharan Africa, and we talk about why that is. But our job is really to take companies from pre-seed right up to Series A, and we do it in a very curated way. We're a fund, but we operate like a fund and accelerator at the same time.
Brilliant, brilliant. And the man everybody wants money from, Sharif, tell us a bit more about yourself and DFDF.
All right, thanks, Brenton. Great to be here at RiseUp again, my favorite event in the world, and definitely in the region. I've been coming to RiseUp since 2015, and it's what pulled me in from the US, and I ended up moving out here. I had Janade's title on my previous fund, so most active investor in the region. From 2017 to 2020, we did 55 deals in Egypt. Still think Egypt is the best market.
I'm one of them, guys.
Yeah, and he invited us in, and we were lucky to be a part of it. One thing he missed is he didn't tell you how big that first exit was. The largest exit in the region, I think, at the time for a tech startup, or at least somewhat up there. We have a great ecosystem here, and it's only gotten better. I mean, there were generations, you could say phases pre-COVID. There were maybe two phases. The first sort of initiative of starting up, and then a wave of VCs came in the late teens. Then COVID happened, and now we're in sort of this new wave of the region getting a lot more of its own government support in different countries and establishing a much stronger foundation. So for me, I mean, this is everything that the mission calls for, is providing capital to, right now, through the Dubai Future District Fund, we provide capital to the venture capital firms. So I've kind of moved upstream a little bit from that perspective. And we still do direct investments, pre-seed to Series C across 15 sectors. So we cover a lot, but that's also because we're a fund of funds and a government-backed vehicle. Done 250 transactions in the last 5 years, I think. I want to do it for the rest of my life. I think this is. I'd rather go back and be an operator, to be honest. But if I can't do that, I'm not as sharp as I used to be. At least I can provide capital to those who will.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. Like I said, we've got, I think, an exceptional mix of opinions, both from the Pan-African perspective, the GCC and MENA perspective, and of course, Abudlaziz having operated in most of these markets. So Abudlaziz, I'd like to start with you. You know, operating in most of the GCC and now in Egypt, I think you've got a very good insight into what the overall sort of macroeconomic situation looks like across those markets. We've seen MENA explode as a venture ecosystem. We've seen the same in Africa. They're largely fragmented, which I think is the goal of this panel, is to chat about how we solve that. But with respect to MENA and the GCC, what is your current view over the region, and what do you see as the macro situation?
Sure. I mean, just high level, we're a 450 million population, right? The MENA region. We try to look at the region as a homogeneous economy. And as you've stated correctly, it's actually very fragmented. Every country has its own laws. Every country has its own culture. Sometimes even different cities from the same country have their own dialect. It's a very fragmented region. Nevertheless, despite all of that, the past 5 years, we have seen material improvements in our infrastructure, right? We have seen internet penetration rates go up. In some cases, it's more than 100%, where people have multiple access to internet, smartphone penetration, payments, logistics. The infrastructure and readiness has never been better in our part of the world. If you look at governments and what are they doing, there are there is a plethora of developmental programs like never before, right? All the way from Morocco to UAE. It's just so much going on from governments that are helping. Egypt being quite centric to that. We've seen the Saudi government, the UAE government, the Kuwaiti government pouring in more than $75 billion in the Egyptian economy, right? We've seen very active GCC VC funds like Sharif is really doing a lot there, or many others, still committing to Egypt till this date, investing more in startups that really flourish. And we've seen a lot of companies actually come from Egypt to the GCC, or the other way around, vice versa, from the Gulf coming to Egypt. I think if there were great examples that have succeeded from Egypt or from the GCC in the past 10 years, I think today, with the infrastructure we have, with a lot of the governmental support we are seeing, it's never been a more optimistic view going forward. So I'm very excited. I know Egypt has gone through hard times in the past, but I think with all the unity and vision we have for the region, I've never been more optimistic.
Brilliant. I know it's a sentiment that the other panelists and myself definitely share. Janade, coming to you, Launch Africa's done an amazing 23 investments in Egypt. Like you mentioned, some of them are exhibiting here today. But when we spoke in private, and I think this is quite commonly known, right? Those startups, once they've sort of saturated their beachhead market, the next markets they look to enter is the GCC countries, as opposed to potentially markets like Sub-Saharan, East, West Africa. Why do you see that as the case? And do you foresee a future where a Pan-African strategy becomes as important as a GCC strategy for startups coming out of the region?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it absolutely makes sense. You know, I think that Egypt, there is no Middle East without Egypt, right? It's the biggest market, most talent, and it needs to drive that strategy. But I often think that Egyptian founders forget that there's a desert, but then there is a billion people below that desert, which provides market access. I mean, Abdul Sharif just mentioned that the entire region is 450 million people. If you look at Francophone Africa alone, which is 17 relatively small countries, French-speaking Africans, that's 440 million people, right? There's 1.4 billion Africans on the entire continent. So if you're looking for market access, and if you're looking for the ability to find talent, you should be looking south, right? Same is happening south side of the Sahara. Is internet penetration is going up, the cost of living and the consumer spending is gradually going up. And what Africa has that no other continent has is our average age is 18 and increasingly becoming younger. So I think in the Middle East, the average age is like 39, if I'm not mistaken. Compare that to where your business will be in 2050. Where's your talent going to come from? Where's your software developers? Where's your data scientists going to come from? You will have to look south of the border. So it is great to expand to the GCC area because they are sophisticated corporates and you all want to chase corporate enterprise customers and more developed markets, financial markets, and better infrastructure. But if you are looking for where's my future market access going to come from, you will have to look south. And that's why we are truly Pan-African, because through our platform, we help Egyptian founders or North African founders expand south through our collaboration. For example, we have an investment in One Trolley, the Egyptian e-commerce platform. We are now helping them to scale to Nigeria. Nigeria, fantastic market, very sophisticated consumer, but maybe the company that we're trying for them to merge with, not the great sophisticated tech, whereas the Egyptian founder, smaller market, fantastic tech. They should be working together. And so we are trying for our platform to be that sort of bringing together of different areas within the African continent. We don't only do that for North Africa, but we bring East Africa to West Africa and Southern Africa. And that's really our strategy, is how do we truly create a pan-African community of entrepreneurs?
Brilliant. And I think that actually is the perfect foray over to Sharif. Sharif, I think that the role that Dubai Future District Fund plays in acting as the glue between the regions is so pivotal. You've invested in funds like Sharif Partners, a lot of Middle East, North Africa focused funds, but also Pan-African funds like Partech Ventures. And do you see DFDF playing a role in exactly what Janade described, in investing and seeding more funds that have a cross-regional focus and seeding the next generation of managers, you see the next generation of companies that have similar views on markets?
Yeah, so I really like the points the three of you guys made. I'll try to add a little bit of color to that, because I've actually, and I'm sure a lot of us, we're thinking about this exact problem for the last almost decade, because we're a multi-country region like LATAM and like Southeast Asia. So we have challenges to face, maybe even you could call opportunities that contiguous countries like the US or China don't have. And so it started with, hey, we have borders, and so hiring and customs and taxes and policies and licenses and everything is different. And those end up equating to additional fees and costs on the balance sheet, and time, and just holes that you have to or jump through. So that causes a lot more friction than your counterpart in another country that's more homogeneous. So just be aware of that and the challenges with it. Now, we have some ambitious founders that I think realize very quickly, I can't be a one market company. Investors aren't going to be attracted to that. Let me jump and do market expansion like crazy. Just be careful with that, because you're going to sacrifice one thing for the other. And you can do it methodically and follow your roadmap, which is my advice. Don't chase funding, don't chase incentives, because that's what a lot of countries tend to do to bring you to them to help build their ecosystems. But first and foremost, you should follow your strategic roadmap. If that roadmap takes you to Finland, go to Finland. If it takes you to Saudi, go to Saudi. But what we find is people are just kind of without a plan in place, just scattered, trying to just run around different countries. That's not how market expansion is done. The other thing to consider is what your country, its strengths are versus what it's lacking. Egypt has tons and tons of strengths, but is lacking some things, and we just have to be self-aware of what those things are. Saudi has some things, but it's lacking others. UAE, same. Every country in this region is the same. No single country here has it all. So you have to kind of play to those strengths. You have local to global models, local to regional. You have some that say, oh, I'm going to bring a technology or a company and do transfers into the region. All of those are different models that work. You just got to figure out which one you're building. Are you building a company in Egypt for Egypt? And then what part of Egypt is that for? Top 10% or the long tail 90%? Because they're extremely different businesses. In my mind, which is not what everyone's building, but the value of Egypt's market size is the long tail. And we have some companies who have just went straight after that. You may never hear those brands, right? But that makes sense, because that is the biggest prize of Egypt, is its market size. Not purchasing power, not infrastructure, not these other things. So, and those are much harder businesses to run, because even if you're a software-driven business, you have to deal with the physical world in that regard. Another one, just to touch on, is corridors. And it's something we've talked to organizations like Endeavor and many other multi-country organizations, how we can work with them to build corridors between certain countries like Egypt or Nigeria to the UAE, or Pakistan, given what's been happening there. So countries that may have economic uncertainty or currency devalues and things like that, well, those are great countries to export from, to build kitchens in, and then you can do your sales in other countries and have bank accounts in other countries where you can generate revenue and stronger currencies. So there are combinations that make a lot of sense. Not that every business you think of will fit that perfectly, but things that if you think of them in advance, you can plan better for them. And what we're doing now is retroactively going around companies and saying, look, if you happen to be a company based out of Egypt and your kitchen's in Egypt, but you're at almost Series A level, which means you're probably ready to start expanding, and you feel like your market opportunity is better in Saudi or in the UAE. Opening a company in one of those countries with a bank account can really hedge the risk against your business in the future. So that's one angle. Another angle we touched on is Africa to UAE versus or Egypt, say, to Africa versus Egypt to GCC. And we see a pretty even split of companies that are doing that. Pre-COVID, everyone wanted to come to GCC. It seems post-COVID, I've been to Egypt maybe, 5-6 times since then. There's a lot more conversation and conferences about Africa, which I'm really happy because we always thought that made a lot more sense for some types of businesses. If you're a business that's really an emerging market type of fit, and less of a sort of, I'm borrowing this business from Silicon Valley, maybe Africa is actually the big opportunity for you, not so much, countries in the GCC. And each has its own costs that have to be weighed. We, for example, you mentioned Partech. We're happy to be investors with Partech and a couple other funds that are in our wider geography. So we have these concentric circles we look at. We look at Dubai because we're, just like many of the LPs in the market these days, we're developmental. So this is government money to develop their own economy. Pre-COVID, all the funds, all the sovereigns that we had raised funds from didn't think so, like, down at their feet. It was much more, you're investing in the region, great, make some good bets. Post-COVID, things changed quite a bit. I mean, almost every LP in the region now has a geographic restriction to their funding, and the DFIs coming in from Europe, which thankfully have, fed, I think, Egypt funding that was really lacking pre-COVID, and now kind of caught up a little bit from that angle, and North Africa, Levant. So those DFIs cannot invest in the GCC, so they will invest in Levant, Africa, and North Africa. So pockets of funding, this is an important point because this came up 4 or 5 years ago, and I think it's quite bothersome, even though I'm now kind of one of them in a way, but I took on that role so I could try to push on it a little bit, but I don't think that's the best strategy for the future. If you look at the 2050 economy reports that say in the next 30 years, the population of the world will double. We will run out of food. We're going to run out of energy. We're going to run out of a lot of different things. Certain countries will be affected more than others. So we're going to move into a world where it's not so much like globalization, which is now regressing quite significantly. It's more like helping your neighbor out with the resources that you have. So in Morocco, for example, they built a very large solar farm. That solar farm is not to serve Morocco. It's actually to serve Southern Europe, if I'm not mistaken. And they say in these reports that is what the future, how to fix the problems of the future, is that countries with some resources would need to share those resources with others, and so on. UAE, for example, if the population doubles, we get to 20 million people, no big deal, we can handle that. But there are going to be a lot of neighboring countries to us that don't have jobs. So there's ways to sort of leverage each other. And I think it's actually, in the spirit of that, it's actually very positive. So when we did these funds, so we have Dubai, UAE, MENA or MENAPT, and then MIASA. MIASA includes Africa and South Asia. And we've done a fund in India and 2 funds in Africa so far. And what's really funny is 4 African fund managers that we know, 4 different funds have a fund manager that lives in Dubai. And we asked them, like, what are you doing here? Like, you invest in Africa. Why are you living in Dubai? And turns out, I mean, I didn't know this at the time, but it is much easier to get to each country in Africa on a daily basis through flights from Dubai than it is from Africa to Africa. So that was shocking to me, but it makes sense now. Logistically, this is a lot easier for them. And then we had some startups that, born in Africa, end up moving their entire HQ to another country nearby because it's just more access and infrastructure for their headquarters and their teams. One example is Move Africa from Nigeria. Great company. They've expanded a lot. I think they're even in Europe now. They moved 100-something people to Dubai. Again, if I'm not mistaken, don't quote the facts. But generally, just saying that this movement is healthy. I don't think the protectionist type of movement is the long-term solution, but when a company decides that's what's right for their roadmap, I think that's the way to go for them. And it's going to be different for everyone. We encourage any company from Egypt that feels like it has a regional or global potential, consider putting feet on the ground in multiple countries to hedge yourself. And I think that's the sort of strategy we're trying to work on now.
Brilliant. So with that, we'll wrap up what was an unbelievable panel. If you have any questions, please find the panelists. I'm sure they'll be around after this. But can we just give them a round of applause to close off?